Okay, hi, and thanks for watching again. Before we get started, please like and subscribe if you enjoy these videos, and that really helps. But today we are going to take a look at the Behringer VT911 vintage tube overdrive, and a mod that I did to make it into a very good overdrive pedal. I think I really like it, and I actually have a schematic today, so we'll get into that. Before we get started, I guess if you've ever played this pedal, um, you'll notice that like with this the drive, it's like zero, no volume, no volume, no volume, and then from like zero point 0.7 to 1, it suddenly goes from no volume to crazy distorted, just almost fuzz like tones, and then from there you really don't get a whole lot of difference in tone just changing the drive knob. And it's a really not useful, probably why it's so unpopular, which is kind of unfortunate because it has so much potential, but and so everyone kind of hates on it. And you can find these really cheap in the used market. I think I bought mine for 15 bucks probably. If you want to hear what this pedal sounds like in stock form, please go online and look for videos that show how it sounds. But first, before we get into the schematic, I wanted to talk about what we have to do first is to change the power supply. And so you want a 12 volt power supply, and I don't know if this is going to be in focus, but this is just a cheap one that I had lying around. I should probably get a better one because this is kind of noisy, but it's a 12 volt power supply. And the problem with something like this, which is probably made for more of like a home appliance use, is that the positive and negative terminals are not what typical pedals expect. And so normally in anything that's available probably outside of the pedal world, the center, I should probably unplug this, the center tap of the inside part, and this probably isn't focused, but the inside part of this is the positive of the two, and the outside is the negative or the ground. But with pedals, they usually want to see a negative center and a positive outside. I have no idea why that happened. Probably something historic somewhere. But anyway, so this is a 12 volt battery or 12 volt power supply, but the center is positive and the outside is negative. So I just made a little DIY converter that takes that and reverses it. So it's now center negative and the outside is positive. So you connect that to this and this to the power supply and plug that into the pedal. So before we get into the pedal, I want to talk about the mods. Okay, so we're back and we're taking a look at the schematic of the Behringer VT911. This is the original schematic before it has been modded. I'm just going to show it just so if you guys are interested, you can freeze the screen right now and copy it or whatever. But you can find this online without a problem. So I'm going to put on top the stuff that I did to this, and hopefully I can get this. Okay, so that should be good. So basically, you have the 12 volt power supply that I talked about, and this half of the circuit before it goes into the tubes. By the way, this is sort of a copy of the BK Butler tube driver, but they did a really poor job with the details. So that's why it does have a lot of potential to be a great pedal, but I think they cut some of the costs and left some stuff out. But anyway, you want the 12 volt power supply, and then some of the stuff I did to the pre-tube part is to change this to a 1 meg, and then I cut off the R2, is it? It's a 1 meg resistor that goes across the lugs of the drive knob. This is the drive knob, this is the volume knob, this is the tone knob. And so that's pretty much all I did to the first part of the circuit. And then from there we go into the tube section, and there's not a whole lot I did here as well, but again, the big thing is that I added a charge pump in the circuit, and you'll see it in the photographs. I'll probably cut to the photographs now. I just stuck it onto the frame of the pedal, so if I were to throw this around, it'd probably fall off and cause problems. But in any case, it's a charge pump that takes a 12 volts and converts it to 24 volts. You can find schematics for charge pumps all over the web. I used ICL7660 chips. There's also an MAX1044, I think it is, that you could use, and some other options too. But basically, you just want to build a small little charge pump and throw it in there and take the 12 volts and then use that to double that to 24 volts for the tube. Now, looking at the tube part of the schematic, change some values. First of all, I cut off the 470k coming off the 24 volts and in between the two tube stages, and then I changed, there's a 1k there that I changed to a 470 ohms. Not a whole lot of difference, but and then I put a 24k in between the two tube stages going to ground. That's kind of a BK Butler thing that I borrowed. I also changed the capacitor values for the tone stack. This was 0.01 microfarads. Now it's 0.022, and this is 0.047 microfarads, and now it's 0.033. That's just a personal preference thing. I didn't like the way the tone knob was working, and so I changed it to more of a useful range of tones, or treble, I guess. And then at the end, it goes through a op-amp buffer stage. This is a 4 op-amp chip. If you look inside, you'll see this long chip, and it has 4 op-amps in it. And so one's used up here, one's here as a buffer, and one's here for the gain stage. And this last one is used as a buffer for the output. But I added 2 resistors to create another gain stage here. So it's just a full frequency gain stage, but what that does is that it lets you use the volume quite a bit more. Whereas without this, you'd have to have the volume at like 7 or 8 to get unity. And with this, you probably can have the volume at like 3 or 4 to get unity. And so then you could use it as a boost into other pedals or into an amp. These values you can change. You could probably put a trim pot or a regular pot here for the 8.2k, and then so you can adjust that if you want to have sort of another volume stage. But I just set these because I kind of liked the way they sounded, or the volume that they got. Anyway, so that's one thing that you probably should do to get more volume out of the pedal. And I think the biggest thing that I did was to put a 10k pot here right at the input of the first gain or the first tube stage. And also, this is a 1.5k. I changed that to 15k, and I put a 10k audio taper pot here. Basically, that's what it's doing is it's creating sort of a volume knob that goes into the tube stage. So if you look at the schematic, basically what you have is a buffer stage and you have a gain stage. And the gain stage just feeds that signal straight into the tubes, and it's just feeding this loud signal into the tubes, and so the tubes are going to overdrive. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to have 2 separate gain knobs, one for the op-amp gain and then one for sort of a tube gain, if you will. Right now, in stock form, all you have is the gain knob for the op-amp, and when you crank it, you also get op-amp distortion, and that's kind of a good part of the nasty tone that the Behringer has, and that's probably why it's hated quite a bit, and you'll hear that in the sound demos later. But basically, to have 2 knobs separately, I was able to create a situation where you can keep the op-amp clean, but then change this knob so that you get more signal going through the tubes, and you're actually sort of overdriving the tubes. And then you can change this to make it clean as well if you wanted to. And so I think that was probably the big thing that I did, aside from the 24 volts, which is pretty critical if you want to use a tube, and even 24 volts, as you probably know, is definitely not enough to be driving 12 AX7s. So, but that's the gist of it. I think that covers everything. And let me know if you have any questions. So let's move on to some tone samples. Okay, so we're back, and let's see. Let's start with the clean tone. I'm again on my Telecaster. Start with the neck pickup. Okay, sounds like that. And then we're gonna. So this is the knob for the tube section of the overdrive, and this is the regular op amp part, tone knob and output knob. And then so we'll turn on, and this LED is crazy bright. I don't know why they did it that way, but just probably just a cheap part they could find, but it's crazy bright. Okay, and so let me go through the tone knob real quick. Hopefully you can see what I was talking about with the tone knob range. Okay, so that gives you like a really good useful range. And so this is the op amp gain, like I said. And so I'll go through that first so you get an idea of how sort of bad it could sound. And so let's go to the bridge pickup and off. Okay. Okay, so from here, I'm going to slowly increase this, and then you start hearing some overdrive around 5 or 6, and then it's going to get really worse once you get up to like 8. And at like 10, it's like almost this fuzz, and which is cool if you want that tone, but it's definitely not an overdrive. Okay, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. It gets really bad up in the 8 to 10 range. Even at 6 or 7, it doesn't sound all that great. So now I'm going to keep the gain knob for the op amp around 4, which is where I like it. And I'm going to turn the gain knob for the tube. The reason why I have it at noon is that's pretty much where it stays clean. Anything below it, it's just going to get really quiet, because if you think back at the schematic, you're just bleeding all the signal to ground. So starting around noon, let's stay on the bridge pickup. So hopefully you can hear that even at maximum, it doesn't sound bad at all. It sounds like a cranked tube amp. Has a nice distortion. It doesn't break up in a really nasty way, and so I really like it with this setting, or with this knob added. You can get like a really clean tone if you want it. Like this is pretty clean. So as you saw right there, pretty much at these settings, it's more or less just neutral. So if you cranked up the output, you could use it as a clean boost. And then obviously you can add tone accordingly to make it into like a treble boost or whatever. But using this knob, you can actually add some gain in there and then use it as an overdrive boost, which is great. We're not going to do that today because it's probably going to clip the soundboard. But let's see. Let's try. Like my kind of favorite setting is this around 3 o'clock, and then keeping this at 5. So it just adds just a hint of the op amp gain. Probably this around 4.5. Volume probably 3. Let's go into the neck pickup. Okay, so for the hell of it, let's try something different. Let's crank this, and it's gonna get real noisy. But let's crank that, and see what we get. This is gonna be pretty loud, I think. Let's go to the bridge pickup. So that's kind of fun if you wanted to do that. And let's crank it all the way. So okay, so that's that. And anyway, I think that's it. Obviously I could go through different tones, but it's kind of self-explanatory. You'll get good tones going through this. We already did that. And then this, blend in some fuzz if you want, and you could get some crazy fuzzy distorted tones like I just did, or you can go really clean, all that kind of good stuff. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully this gets you interested in this pedal. It's a great deal if you can find it cheap, and if you can go through the process of modding it. I had a lot of fun modding it, and I've had a lot of fun playing it, so definitely recommend it if you can find one. And let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.